the mastermind group, having a group of colleagues and a coach has kind of how it's influenced this process of the last 5 years and, creating a successful pediatric therapy business.
I think being part of a mastermind group is it's like going from being on an island to being, you're not on your island, you're at the resort and you're like with all the people and you're living your best life, right? Because you have someone to go to, you have a whole group of people that are all walking this journey and like want to help you. I feel like the people that are in this group authentically want to like learn from each other, but also help. Like I love when I can put something in the chat that I've learned and I'm like, okay, I'm giving as well as getting. Like I like giving as much as I like showing up to get something.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's episode is an interview with Kristen Pfeil, who is a pediatric occupational therapist in Lincoln, Nebraska. And her journey in cash-based private practice began when she was let go by an insurance-based practice because of falling reimbursements. And when that happened, she took it as a sign to finally pull the trigger and start her cash practice. And within a few hours of making the decision, she already had her first patient booked. So a bit of poetic justice there. And in this interview, you're going to hear all about what's worked and hasn't worked, the lessons she's learned along the way. She has a sub-niche in feeding therapy. You're obviously going to hear all about the marketing tactics that have paid off the biggest for her, but also a lot of things involving employee management and especially like compensation packages and strategies there, as well as the fact that she owns her own building. Sure, her office is in a building and it's mixed commercial and residential, which is really cool. The residential offsets the mortgage. She's done amazingly well. And I'm so proud to have had her in my mastermind coaching group for the last 3 years. So this coming Tuesday, when this is going to be publishing, she's going to be our monthly featured mastermind member and doing a Q&A for all the current members. So if you hear anything in today's episode that you want to get more details on, or you just want to be able to ask her any questions at all, you can do that live. You can join us in our mastermind at drjaredcarter.com/mastermind. And you can use the code JAN, like January, so JAN 50. JAN 50. That'll give you 50% off your first month. And you can join us, ask all of your questions live, get the support of that amazing group, along with all of my coaching and resources that we've put together through the years to make sure that you can have success in your cash-based practice, no matter what field you're in and what part of the country or the world that you're in. It's all there, and we are here to support you. So check it out, drjaredcarter.com/mastermind. And with that said, please enjoy my conversation with Kristen Pfeil. Welcome, Kristen, and thank you so much for taking the time. Why don't we kick it off as usual with you just giving your story? What got you into occupational therapy and how long, kind of what led up to you starting your own practice?
Sure. I was in the first entry-level doctorate program in OT in the nation. So that was at Creighton University in 2002. So that feels like a long time ago, but not really that long. So I've been in OT for about 22 years. Always knew that I wanted to do pediatrics. And so that's really where I saw myself, and that's where I took jobs. I moved out to Portland, Oregon after graduating because I had a husband in optometry school. So he affectionately called me his sugar mama, and I worked 3 jobs while he went to school. And then once he graduated, we moved back to Nebraska, which is where we were both from, and have been here ever since, raising our family. And I've worked, since we moved back, I've worked in school systems. I've worked in 3 other private practices. I worked in the NICU for a while. So I've done a variety of pediatric stuff and really just always felt that calling on my heart to start my own practice. But it was like we had twins. And so I was so busy with that. And then we'd already had one. So it was like, it never was the right time. And then I was working at a practice that had hired me specifically it was a speech only practice, hired me to specifically come in and start OT. I'd been there about 2 years and they called me in on a Friday and said, insurance reimbursements down, we've eliminated your position. And I was like, okay, I guess I am getting the big loud message. Now's the time. So that was a Friday, and Friday afternoon, I already had booked a patient and was like, okay,
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So it was a family that I had seen at the past clinic, and they had reached out with a question. And anyway, the rest is history. So me and Charlie started Connect Pediatric Therapy 5 years ago. So
You and Charlie.
Charlie is my first patient who now is graduating from high school. I've known him since he was in first grade. And yes, I adore that family. They still stay in contact. And anyway, so yes, he was my very first patient. So, but the practice really, my partner in crime, because it was just me, is Diesel, the therapy dog. He really is the only one that's been with me the whole time. So, and he's still here.
Diesel, I like
So,
that. What kind of
yeah.
dog is Diesel?
He's a black Labrador, and
Nice.
he's pretty fantastic. Yeah, it's really fun to see how intuitive he is with the kids that need a little bit
Yeah.
of calming. He'll kind of inch his way closer, or if he can tell kids are getting a little overwhelmed, he goes back. I sometimes think parents need him more than the kids do, because parents come in frazzled because life is just really hard in this season,
Yeah.
and just love on Diesel for a little bit. And it's like, whew, life is
That's
better.
awesome.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's fantastic. Yeah. Last time we were at the hospital with Gray, right as we were about to leave, one of our dear friends like walks by with her therapy dog. And I was like, "What are you doing here?" She's like, "I started doing this." And this dog was just perfect. And she was talking about all these stories of how that dog has affected not just the kids, but the parents, just like that. I mean, it's really, really tough times. And yeah, that's so cool that you got a true therapy dog there.
Yeah,
And that you,
yeah.
and I'd love to just, I love that you were like, okay, well, the message is loud and clear, and within a few hours you had your first patient booked. I mean, that might be a record of some sort. That's fantastic. So take us from there. You started out with that one patient, and how quickly did things get going? Give us the context from
Yeah, so
those
it was
days.
2019, April of 2019, and kind of just started at my house. We had built a house and hadn't finished the basement. And so it was like, well, guess what? I have a purpose for the basement. And luckily, I married a very handy guy who's like, okay, well, I guess we're going to get to work. And so we kind of
Cool.
started, and it had its own kind of, it's a walkout. So it had its own entrance. So I got a sign that for the stairs that led down that said Connect Pediatric Therapy this way. And we kind of made do until we could make it happen. And it didn't explode. It was like one patient a day, two patients a day. But it reached a point where I knew if I was going to grow, it needed to not be out of my basement, because I didn't want I needed to hire, and I didn't want someone coming in and out of my home. Like, that just felt uncomfortable to me,
Sure.
because we didn't have a way to like close off the basement from the rest of the house. So if I could do that, that would have been maybe a little different. But it just was really. And then also, I just think there's some legitimacy in having like a brick and mortar clinic. I think it lends itself to, I'm more credible than, hey, come to my house and hang out with me. It just didn't feel as legitimate. So COVID happened then. And so it was kind of, big pivot time. I mean, that was a really kind of, if I'm going to make this go, then I'm going to have to pivot right now and not wait for the world to decide what it's going to do. So kind of put everybody on telehealth, and while the world closed down. And I was surprised how many people stuck with me. There's only so much you can do with kids through a screen when you're working on feeding and sensory processing and self-regulation. We did the best we could. And then as soon as I could get people masked and back, I did. That was still in my basement, which again felt kind of nervous, like, oh, I'm bringing all these people into our house.
Yeah, yeah.
And so at that point, we just kind of said, okay, kids, you do not come to the basement. That's where mom's clients are at. We're just going to kind of keep separation. And during that time, my husband and I found a development that was going on, kind of a new concept in Lincoln, where it's like business on the first floor, residential on the second. And so we just kind of took the jump and said, all right, we're going to put your clinic on the first floor, and we'll have apartments on the second floor, which has turned out to be a really nice thing. So we have the rental income from our apartments to offset the mortgage for the clinic and the building. So it's really been a huge blessing that we were
Y'all
able
were
to.
able to buy the building itself.
Yes, we bought the whole building. So we have 2 apartments upstairs, and my clinic is on the first floor in the basement. So
It's fantastic. Well,
yeah.
I didn't realize that. Now that you mention it, I remember, us discussing that a while back and it
Mhm.
coming up, but I had forgotten that y'all own the building, which as I've said multiple times before, I've heard from a lot of different business owners. It's like that's the best thing I ever actually did was own, buy the building where I'm
Oh,
off.
100%.
Yeah, that's cool. And really, literally, the upstairs offsets a lot of the downstairs mortgage, which I'm sure your business pays you guys directly.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
just
Absolutely.
benefit of that with the overhead as well as the tax benefits and write-offs of the insurance and that kind of thing is fantastic. So if anyone out there listening, if you get only one thing from this, you have the opportunity to purchase where you're going to office, do it. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
so great. So that you interestingly enough, you kind of made that big jump. For a lot of people, that would be super scary, not just taking on the overhead, but like y'all literally bought a building in the midst of the pandemic.
Yeah.
High five for, taking the risk and pulling the trigger on that. And yeah, at that point, were you still a solo practitioner? Did you have any? It sounded like you were waiting to get a brick and mortar to hire somebody.
Yeah. So interestingly, I moved in here and my dad, who was a retired insurance executive, became my clinical coordinator just till I could kind of get things rolling, which was such a gift to spend that time with my dad, like, because I just hadn't had that in a long time. And it was really fun. I don't know if that's the right word, but to see his mindset change from like he'd spent his whole career doing insurance and it was life insurance, not health insurance, but still insurance to like, I can't believe how insurance companies treat providers. And like, don't you ever think about taking insurance? It was just because he was doing all the what little we deal with insurance companies, he was doing all of that. That was, you helped me kind of figure out the Blue Cross Blue Shield thing when they were sending me checks, what to do with that. And he was right in the heat of that, like calling Blue Cross Blue Shield. And anyway,
Yeah.
so
So y'all would like other things that he dealt with and finding out what they're really like. So like calling to say why weren't you processing this self-claim for this patient, that kind of stuff. Is that kind of
it was just calling insurance companies kind of, I wouldn't say we do a lot of we don't get into that too much about why aren't you processing. If a family reaches out to us, then we certainly will fax whatever we need on their behalf. But because I've used Reimbursified for a long time, so that's doing a lot of the processing of claims. So it was more of insurance, because as I'm sure you experience, the insurance companies still will call and try to negotiate with us about like rates and all these things about like, well, we'll give you $53 for that evaluation, or we'll give you so he was dealing with a lot of that as we were getting started and getting things set up with Reimbursify and all of that, the out of network stuff.
so you kind of had him as for administrative help, and then from there you were able to bring on your first clinician.
Yeah, so I hired another OT, and then for Father's Day, I said, I'm firing you, or I'm retiring you. I think I said, I'm retiring you. I've hired a clinical coordinator. So yes.
Cool.
So he was here for probably 6 months, just helping me get the building going. And like I said, that was such a gift to have that time with him, but also just to have somebody to help me out because I've been doing everything up to that point.
Yeah.
So to
So
offload.
before we kind of push forward from that point in the story up to that point, for those who are looking at doing this or are in that first year or so, what were some of your most important lessons learned?
I think building connections with referral sources was really important, especially in pediatrics. You got to get to know your pediatricians. And so I started with my kid's own pediatrician and talked to him about my idea of, hey, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to start this practice and it's going to be out of network. And he's part of a bigger group. So he arranged a time for me to come in and speak to all the providers about feeding therapy and how to do referrals for that. I made sure that I would call physicians back when I had, like if I would do an eval and I would say, hey, because patients can come, they don't need a referral from a doctor to see us. And so I would call the physician back and say, hey, this family sought out therapy. Here are some of my thoughts. And there's certainly, and I'm sure this is true in all physician groups, but like there are some pediatricians that really love that and love that I did that. Some wouldn't return my phone call, but the ones that loved it continue to refer and call me. And
when you told your pediatrician, or I don't know if you mentioned it when you're in front of the entire group, when you said it's going to be out of network, what was the response?
So I told him right away, it's going to be out of network. I'm tired of dealing with insurance companies. And I think that he goes, I think that's a really good idea. Interestingly, he personally never, I think he never referred anybody to
He's
me.
never referred to anyone.
But again, what was important about that is he did bring me in to talk to all the providers. And there are like 3 of them that send me a lot of feeding kits. And they'll tell me, I've seen them out in, the community, and they'll be like, well, if I have a tough feeding kid, you're the only one I'm going to send them to.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lesson to learn, right? Like, is maybe not the first person you talk to is the one that is going to be the one that helps you. It's maybe who that person connects you to that is really what the connect. So you just have to you never know who's gonna be a good connection point, so I think just talking about it as much too, just posting on Facebook, on my personal Facebook page, I'm doing this, and then friends would tell their friends who would, so it's like, I really, as I look at where I get people, it's not from pediatricians, it's from word of mouth. And I know you've said that too a lot. Like, a happy patient is your best referral source. Somebody's life that you have positively impact, they're going to tell everybody they know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really, I think, something I learned too, is like, because I got so stuck for a while about, gosh, these pediatricians aren't referring to me. And then I just really was like, I just need to talk to anybody that will listen to me about why I'm doing what I'm doing, because nobody else is doing that.
Yeah.
Pediatric out of network in Lincoln, Nebraska wasn't happening. Like, I am it. And I don't know if I'm still it, because I don't know. Maybe that's not smart to like be keeping my feelers out about who the competition is, but it doesn't matter. Like, I'll see whoever is put before me, like.
Yeah. And so it, compared to the in-network, in this case, feeding services, feeding therapy options, how is what you do notably different? Like, what are the selling points? If we're talking about like the actual, not how you sell it, but the differentiating points from what you do compared to what they can get using their insurance.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to start my practice is because you keep working for people and it's like you're hitting a brick wall, because there's a better way to do things. And when people don't want to hear it, it gets so frustrating when you have these, so like, first and foremost, in pediatrics, if you don't involve the parent, I don't feel like you're going to get the power of change that you could.
Yeah.
Then everywhere I'd worked, it was, you take that kid for 45 minutes back to a therapy room, and then you bring them back to the waiting room, and then you talk about what you did, and you say, okay, see you next week. Mm-hmm. But with feeding, in order to get true success, you have to do that at every meal, every day. And guess what? I don't live with these kids. So I need a parent's buy-in, and I need them to understand what I'm doing and why that works, and maybe what doesn't work. So, oh my goodness, did you see how I did that? Or, oop, definitely don't do it that way. And I tell parents, I'm going to mess up a lot, and I want you to learn from those mistakes, because every child is so different that we need to know what works and what doesn't work. And I want you to run with what does work.
Yeah.
So I think that was a real big selling point, and it still is for a lot of families. Like, I want you involved. You are the change maker. I want to facilitate and help empower that change, but you are the change maker in your child's life.
Yeah, very good. And before we get too far off of the physician referral source topic, because you do have a handful at least that do refer to you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other talking points or bits of advice for those that are also in a scenario where it's like, I really do need to have physician referral sources, like things that you've learned along the way? What would you say are the major differentiating factors between those 3 that send to you and say your actual children's pediatrician who never has?
Yeah.
Even though you're literally like, you're a patient of theirs.
Right. I think it's a mindset, right? So my kid's pediatrician's retired about not that long ago. But that being said, he was close to 70 years old. So he's done things a certain way for a period of time, and he's really good. That's why we went to him. He's well-knowledged, very good. But the ones that are sending kiddos to me have graduated from medical school in the last 5 to 10 years. So I think they've been exposed to, wow, we don't have to, like, there's just a lot of different ways to do things. And I think maybe they appreciate the personal contact of me saying, hey, here's my expertise. I really want yours too. Let's work together. So I find it's more of a mindset with physicians who want to collaborate love working with me. Those that don't probably aren't as interested in me because I'm also like I feel like we're all as providers on a level playing ground. And so if somebody feels like they need to be on a pedestal, then I'm probably going to rub them the wrong way because I feel like I have a lot of specialized knowledge to offer.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to, not that I ever get degrading, but I do like I don't just be quiet and say okay to people. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you get involved? I'm curious, do you get involved in swallow studies or go attending those ever or, evaluating the
no, that's really speech therapy. So I will refer kids to go have those with a speech therapist. And those are all done at our hospital. So they have their own providers that would go and do those.
Okay, I was just curious. Is like now, my coaching hat just because Gray just had his best swallow study ever. Actually, it was really
Awesome.
exciting. And our speech therapist, who's his feeding therapist, who's cash pay, she actually goes and attends those. But yeah, that's an only speech therapy kind of allowable thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, another kind of differentiating factor about our practice is we will go into the community. So families that are like home's okay, but they're on the verge of getting kicked out. Can you please go to daycare? Can so that there's no other practice that does that in town. So I think,
So you offer the mobile service
Mhm.
component of it. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do home visits, we'll do school, preschool, wherever families need us.
So we talked about as far as lead generation and patient
Yeah.
generation. The big ones have been word of mouth first and foremost. You have a few really key physician referral sources. Any other things that you've tried over the last 5 years of starting your
Yeah.
practice that seemed to produce at a level that you were happy with? You're like, okay, that was worth the time and effort.
Yeah. So I had a good friend that had a kind of advertising magazine. I'm sure lots of communities have those. And she put me on her back cover. And that was such a gift because what happens when you get one of those magazines, most people lay it down on the counter. And so if they laid it down, like I'm staring at them for a long time, as long as that magazine is sitting there. And I really believe marketing is a layering. Like, I don't think, when we track where are people coming from, they'll tell us like, oh, I did a Google search or so-and-so told me about it. But sometimes I really believe it is a layering of like, hey, I saw you in the magazine. And then my doctor told me I need to get feeding therapy and we kind of put it off. And then and then my whatever, saw you in another magazine. So I think it's sometimes hard to track marketing, like what's really working because maybe the final thing the thing that made them call isn't actually how they were introduced to you. So it's kind of, but I do think the magazine was really effective. We've since added another one because my friend quit doing hers. So I'd had a lot of great success from that though. And we'd have different coupons in there, like $50 off a summer camp because we do summer camps here in the summer. And so, and that's actually a really good thing too, to have events it's been really good to have events at the clinic. So our summer camp kids, we open that up to the community. And I would say not all the kids come back for therapy, but a lot of times parents are like, can we come back and do services here? Is that, because we try to have abundant value. We do a picky eaters feeding camp. We do a kindergarten jumpstart where we're talking about attention and focus, fine motor skills, handwriting, all those things. We do a self-regulation superheroes camp. So
these are individual quote unquote summer camps.
yes. So they're like, we devote a week in the summer. Like the morning it's 3 different weeks because that's a lot. I tried doing like one camp in the morning, one in the afternoon. I thought I was going to die after having all these kids all day. But yes, it's one therapist. And then we recruit volunteers like OT students or whatever to come help to offset our costs a little bit. We've got usually 3 volunteers with each therapist and they're half-day camps and, we advertise for them and it's usually about half Connect kids, half community kids. And then, like I said, those community kids a lot of times turn into patients too. So that's been a really successful way to bring people in as well.
That's awesome. And so when we do your featured member, mastermind member Q&A,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly when it's going to be, but it'll be in the next probably week or two. Let's get into the details of both the magazine ad that was so successful,
Yeah.
was part of that, that made it successful, as well as these events, because I can already think of a few of our members that I could easily incorporate something like that. Maybe it's not a summer camp, but it's like you, how do you price it? How do you fill it? How do you
Mhm.
get the volunteers? All that. Like we'll get into the details of that when we have that
Sure.
with our mastermind group. Great. That's just such a great idea. And I also didn't know that you were doing those. And I also like it's like it wasn't just a feeding summer camp. It was like, hey, kindergarten, get them ready from a fine motor perspective for kindergarten.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of component of it's you're filling a camp in this case or an event with potential clients that the camp is not just specifically about feeding, but
Mm.
it's something that's going to be a little more broadly applicable and desirable
Yeah.
by potential patients. That's great. How long have you been doing those?
It was when we moved here. So this will be our fourth summer.
Cool.
Yeah, a couple years. I've been doing handwriting camps at, I think every clinic I've ever worked at. I've done like a summer handwriting camp. So that's kind of where I got the idea. But gosh, 3 hours is a long time spent on handwriting. So,
Yeah, you did.
and so many of my feeding kids, we work one-on-one, but we've got to learn feeding is such a social activity. So our feeding camps are and I think it's good for kids to understand, oh, I'm not the only one that struggles, that food feels a little scary. So there's this social piece that's been a really powerful piece of that too. Because we usually have a younger group, kind of like 4 to 7, and then we have olders. And last summer it was like these 13 and 14-year-old boys were in our older group. It was so interesting.
That is
And they had all kinds of crazy conversation about different things. So yeah, it's
awesome.
good.
What about lessons learned or things that didn't give the result you were hoping for?
Yeah.
Anything in that genre?
I mean, you preach about this, like not hiring soon enough, not delegating. I think I was in my own way for a long time. I mean, I was seeing patients 5 days a week and I was like, okay, I should probably hire, but I had no capacity to make that happen because I was so busy. So I think I waited way too long to hire someone because of the fear, right? Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to fill somebody's caseload? And like, ah,
Yeah.
you get in your own way so much. So I wish I would have hired a little bit sooner.
Can we, real
Um,
quick, before you go into the next thing, let's
yeah,
talk a little bit about that because this is such a common issue.
yeah,
And I mean, was it 2 days ago when we had our last, weekly coaching call in the
yeah,
mastermind group? That was part of the conversation. And it was like, guys, don't feel like when you hire, whether it's your first clinician or the next one, that you have to immediately have them 100% booked in order to make it a profitable, thing where you're not losing money for some period of time, right? When you run the numbers, it's usually they don't have to have a very full schedule at all before you're at least break even, right? And then the idea of keeping your own schedule 100% booked and then starting from zero with them, like that's also not the way to go either, right? And so tell us a little bit about how it actually went. Like you had this fear, like so many have, right? And
mm-hmm.
then when you did it and you were overloaded, like how am I going to possibly find the time
Right.
to properly onboard and train and all that? So when you did pull the trigger and you found your first clinician, how did
Mhm.
it go? And was it all that you feared? And yeah, let's dive into that kind of.
I think there's actually a regret in there too. I mean, she was an amazing new grad. I did a lot of mentoring with her, but I had put her on a clinical rate and an admin rate. And I think in hindsight, she left after a year to go to the big children's hospital in Omaha, about an hour away. And it was because of pay. And, I think I was so new and I had taken advice from another therapist about what to pay her instead of doing my own, like figuring out my own numbers. What can you actually afford to pay her? Somebody told me, like, this is what new grads are making. And so that's what I paid her, and in hindsight, gosh, I could have offered her more money because I can make more money per patient than the insurance clinic is making. So, so there's a regret. I wish I would have done that better. You know, you learn, you live and learn, right?
Yeah.
So I think she came right before summer camp. So I kind of did baptism by fire. Actually, my last two therapists have come and started right before summer camp. So they get thrown right in to patient care, so to speak, and planning the camps. And then it grew, right? And it's so much, I keep going back to, I need to get out of my own way because I'm in that situation again. I just hired another therapist and she's only got a couple of people on her caseload. And I keep thinking like, well, my caseload's really full. Maybe in my head, I'm like, I need to start merging people over.
Yeah.
And again, there's this fear of like, well, she's not going to do it as good as I do it. So like, that's not a good idea.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but people keep calling, and right now I'm the only feeding therapist. So she needs to take everybody that's not feeding basically, and I keep the feeding and, our littles, all the infant feeding stuff. So I think it wasn't as scary. Going back to your question, like was it as scary? It's not at all. But every time I hire somebody, I revamp how the payment structure looks. And a lot of it, I think I actually asked this at a mastermind, like, can I pay one person hourly and another person, per patient? Or is that weird to be on different payment schedules? But that's what people wanted. So I think that's a lesson I've learned too. Like, don't just pay people the way you think they want to be paid. Like, ask them what's important to you. If it's flexibility, then make sure they have the flexibility. If it's like paid vacation, then figure that,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And when you were onboarding that first one, you're totally busy. And I'm just like now, whenever you hire, it sounds like you stay pretty busy yourself,
yeah,
caseload wise. How did that go? Was it as bad as you thought it was going to be? Did you just find the time?
I don't think it was bad. I would not say bad. I feel like I made sure that I spent an hour mentoring that person every week. So the first week is always just come and observe. And I have these very like week 1, here are all your orientation things. Week 2, here are all your and it's divided out into the first 4 weeks. There's different things every week, like, different videos they need to watch, different things they need to learn how to do. So it's pretty laid out. So week 1 is all observation. Week 2, we add 1 or 2 patients. It's kind of like how you do a level 2 student, right? You phase them in. I want to phase faster though with this one. I'm wanting to like get her a full caseload. But that means me giving up. And again, that's my own internal giving up patience, my own internal struggle of like, I have built this entire business from the ground up. I know what I'm doing, but it's like trusting that my training is enough that that people will get good care from someone else that is not me.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, I mean, that's a mindset thing, but also one of those like, and this is difficult advice to give and take these days when it seems so hard to find therapists at all,
Yeah.
but the advice of not hiring someone that you wouldn't feel confident is going to give a great experience and result, right?
Right.
So what we can do also in the Q&A where where you're answering questions, if you remind me too, we can get into the details of, because there's multiple steps that you can take to really get a lot of the people on your caseload to see a new clinician that you're bringing in. And I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before, but since that's something that needs to happen, let's
Yeah.
make sure we go through that as well. And I just, for everyone listening, it's like the take home point here being that it's generally with Kristen and most other of my colleagues and students who've gone through this process, they've always felt like I waited too long. It wasn't as bad as I thought. You're not always going to make amazing hires and people are going to come and go, but when you need the help, know that it's not like you have to go from, let's say you're seeing 25 patients a week and that's kind of a full caseload for you. You're not going to have to go from 25 to 50 like in a heartbeat, and you're losing a ton of money otherwise, right? It's like you can go from 25 to 35 and give them half of your caseload and they're going to be pretty busy, and it's a profitable move, and you're freeing up all kinds of space in your schedule so that you can work to get more patients and grow. Yeah, so we'll get into the details of that for you in that Q&A. So now it sounds like you have 2 clinicians working with you.
So I'm down to 1.
Oh,
One has put in her notice
wow.
to go work for the school. So I think that's a lesson learned too, right? Like the first person that left, I took it so personally, like, oh my gosh, where did I mess up? But I think what I've learned now that I've hired and lost several people, whether it's my clinical coordinator that's turned over once, I'm hoping this person I have now is phenomenal. I hope she stays till I retire. I told her.
Yeah.
But gone through several OT hires and leaves, and what I would really like to do is hire another one and get to where I have 2 plus me so I can really back off. I think that's a lesson learned too. You need to work as much on your business as in your business. And I focus so much on in my business because that's what I love treating. And so I know I'll never give that up, but I also need to give myself permission to work on the business, that's still productive use of time. And even after 5 years, I still have to remind myself, like, that's still really important. And you need to do that or your business will not grow if you just work in your business.
Yeah, very good. That's a great point. And we're coming up on kind of the end of our blocked off time. So I'd love to shift into, what the mastermind group, having a group of colleagues and, and a coach has kind of how it's influenced this process of the last 5 years and, creating a successful pediatric therapy business.
I think being part of a mastermind group is it's like going from being on an island to being, you're not on your island, you're at the resort and you're like with all the people and you're living your best life, right? Because you have someone to go to, you have a whole group of people that are all walking this journey and like want to help you. I feel like the people that are in this group authentically want to like learn from each other, but also help. Like I love when I can put something in the chat that I've learned and I'm like, okay, I'm giving as well as getting. Like I like giving as much, as much as I like showing up to get something. And so, and that being said, like I will be transparent, like I told Jared earlier, that I've been part of this group for 3 years, but in 2024, for the most part, I was pretty absent. I let myself put patients over that time. And I was looking at kind of year-end things and I'm like, wow, I really haven't acted like a CEO. I've acted like an OT, which is fine to be an OT, but it really isn't growing this business. And so I was doing some hard looking at myself about how are you going to act like a CEO in 2025? And it was like, well, you're already part of this group. Why don't you actually show up and learn things and then put them in place? And then boom, you're back to being a CEO. So I've tried starting in 2025 to be there every Tuesday, even if it's only for 45 minutes. I try to be there and bring a question when I can, because I do know the power of when I ask a question, there's 3 other people that probably could benefit from that question, just like I benefit from other people's questions. So
yeah, I mean, I hear that all the time that, people tend to learn cumulatively way more from other people's questions and those conversations and answers than the one that they have, or 2 that they have for that day. So yeah, and it's been great to have you back. And I mean, I know that, it was a big part of really kickstarting things when you got in your physical space and bringing it to the point where you were able to hire your first clinicians. And it's really been an honor to be a part of, and it's been fun to watch and see you grow and create this fantastic practice. And like I'd said earlier, it's like through you and practices like that, I get to help in this case, very near and dear to my heart, a lot of kids needing therapy and, and especially feeding. Like it's not, there's not a ton of feeding based, cash based practices out there. So, and that's something that's like such an integral part of every week here at our house. It's just really, really glad I get to help you do the same up there in the Great White North.
yeah,
Covered in snow right now. We had a snow day the other day. It was so fun. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up there. And, maybe you could just, any parting advice for anyone who's looking at going into practice or anyone who is in practice that you want to leave us with?
I think figure out your why. I did not do this to make abundance of money. There are other things I could do that would make me, not that I can't make a lot of money, but that's my why was not to make a lot of money. And I think you have to hold close what your why is, because this is hard. Like starting a private practice, especially a cash-based practice, is hard. You're doing something different. And so know why you're doing it and then hold true to that. Like, figure out what is motivating me, because you're going to need that when things get really hard. And then in the really good times, take a minute to look at what you have created and the lives that you are impacting.
Absolutely. Great parting advice. Thank you so much again. And we will, again, as I've mentioned in the intro and a couple times, very soon have Kristen on as our featured mastermind member, where you'll be able to ask her any questions that you have. If you want to join us, then just go to the link that I gave in the intro to this episode. All right, guys. Thanks again, Kristen, and we'll see you soon in the group.
Sounds good.